So we're now moving on to Craig Dalzell, another well-known speaker on the circuit. Craig's topic today is housing. And if you look on the Commonweal website, you'll find at least 5 major reports on issues related to housing, which just possibly reflects the diversity of the ways that each of us relates to the housing sector. We're all in different positions in relation to it. We all have different aspirations, I'm sure. So the housing sector is a really broad one because, you know, it covers topics like inequality, energy, building regulations, and the rental market, all huge topics. So I have no idea what Craig's going to talk about to us today, but I'm very interested to hear. So thank you, Craig.
Thank you. This is going to be a slightly weird talk from the Commonweal crew here. You had a talk with slides from Robin, and now you're getting one without slides from me. So we'll see how this goes. Right. How do we get better housing in an independent Scotland? That was kind of the question I was asked to talk about today. There's a slightly more fundamental question under there. What is housing for? Is it a home for you and your family, or is it someone else's speculative asset? So I think we have housing all wrong in Scotland and the UK. The entire sector is upside down. Think about what it is right now. Think about what is the housing dream for homeowners that we're constantly being pumped at as it's get on the housing ladder and climb the housing ladder. Think about that. You buy a house, you let it appreciate in price. You buy a bigger house, you have kids, you have more kids, you buy a bigger house, you let that appreciate. The kids leave, and then you downsize and you extract the wealth from that property because you're now at the top of the ladder. What do you use it for? Use it to fund your retirement or your care, or because house prices have gone up so much, you give it to your kids so that they can get on the bottom rung of the housing ladder. But you can only do one of those. If you can't buy your house, what do? I was very lucky at the moment I bought my house. We were right at the bottom of the housing ladder and likely to stay there. But if we couldn't buy that house, what do? Our option is privately rent. Terrible landlords, terrible conditions, no control over your house. It's only this year that people in Scotland got the legislation that allows them to paint the wall in their living room if they rent their house. It's something that in Germany has been normal for decades. You spend 2 or 3 times as much renting as you would if you were paying a mortgage, even an overvalued UK mortgage on a house. And you spend so much you can't save for a mortgage. So if you're in the private rented cycle, you're trapped there. Then you retire poor. We've heard that thing about the UK state pension being the lowest in the OECD. It's a misleading statistic. Actually, average overall income for pensioners in the UK is about average compared to the OECD. But the way that pensioners fund their retirement in Britain is a bit weird compared to a lot of other countries in Europe. In the UK, an average pensioner will get about half of their income from the state pension, about 25% from their private pensions, and 25% from capital, the money they got from downsizing their house. In Sweden, an average pensioner gets about 95% of their retirement income from state pensions. That's where I want to aim for Scottish pensions. That's a different talk for another conference. But if we come here and you look at the older pensioners in the UK who have been renting, there is a massive crisis looming, already starting. I was talking about it 5 years ago. The Financial Times has caught up and has started talking about it now. People who are retiring, who don't have capital assets, cannot fund their retirement. There's going to be a massive problem of poverty and older people over the next coming years and decades. What if you can't privately rent? Your option is to rent socially. Too often in the UK, social rents, council houses, is seen as the last stop before homelessness. That was the deliberate attitude of Thatcher. Right to buy crippled both the social guarantee that social housing was, as well as council revenue. I want to flip that idea. I want social housing to start as being the first option for everyone who doesn't want to do something else. We need more social houses. We need to build them better. One of our papers, Good Houses for All, talks about building social rented houses at the highest level of energy efficiency and quality, and doing it using sustainable finance, so that if you're looking out for a house, you think, why do I want to private rent that cold, damp mess? I can get a council house for less that's better. Instantly, you improve people's lives, you improve council revenues, and you force the private sector to up their game to compete. On the ownership, I probably don't have enough time to talk about this because there's more important things I want to talk about, but we do need to arrest and reverse the speculative bubble that is housing. There are ways to do that. Invite me back next year to talk about the global banking sector. Then in private rents, I really want to aggressively increase taxation on multiple ownership of housing. I'm actually really glad to see that the Scottish Government adopted the principle that local authorities can now charge an unlimited surcharge on council houses for multiple ownership. I think that's going to be a really positive thing if councils use it. But we need to change council tax. Council tax is badly broken. If you're in one of Scotland's cheapest houses, one of the council tax you pay, look at that, if you are in Scotland's most expensive house, worth 100 times the cheapest house, you'll only pay 3.5 times as much council tax. That's wrong. One of our papers looks at changing that so that you just pay, like you do in Denmark, a percentage of the current value of your house. We calculated that 0.63%, really weird geeky number, would bring into Scotland about the same amount of revenue as the current council tax does. What that would do is, my house, which is a Band A property, would see its council tax half compared to why. I mean, it's ludicrous that I'm paying effectively double the council tax that I should be. Why am I subsidising some rich person's mansions? That's wrong. I'd also make owners, not residents, pay that tax, so that it would be the landlords paying it. Yes, they could pass some of it on to their tenants, but they couldn't pass on those surcharges for multiple ownership. So that immediately has a big disincentive for people buying up massive amounts of property portfolios. Extend that tax to land. We know the figure now, 421 people own half of Scotland. If you didn't know that figure, what? 421 people own half of Scotland. That number has gone down in the last 10 years, so Scottish land ownership has got more concentrated, and as Robin said, you've got companies like Gresham House are now making up a massive part of that. Make them pay that same 0.63% tax on their land that they own, and you'd bring in about £450 million a year in additional revenue, enough to close the budget gaps of just about every council in Scotland, completely averting the need for public sector cuts or more rises on your already unfair council tax. And that's before we start talking about surcharges that we could be applying to multiple landowners, large landowners, absentee landowners. So that's some of the tax done. How do we start affording building houses? I'm sorry, this is going to be a massive info dump. It's only going to get faster from here. I would look at sustainable finance vehicles like the Scottish National Investment Bank. One of the big reasons I want to see that investing in social housing is because it actually has a secondary effect, not just providing cheap loans for social housing, it stabilises the SNIB's own portfolio. The SNIB right now is very focused on the tech sector. It doesn't have much underneath that. Our original version for the investment bank was a baseline floor of investing in housing and then in slightly riskier projects like energy and then go after the tech sector. You've probably all seen the high-profile failure of M-squared lasers and the £34 million that SNIB is likely to lose as a result of the collapse of that firm. Would that have been quite the same headline if SNIB came back and said, yeah, we're going to lose money on this, but it's fine, we're still in profit because we've got this floor of social housing that we're funding. And that allows us to invest in the innovative tech sector of Scotland. Yes, there will be failures, but when the successes come, they will be worth it. Instead of every time that bank makes a loss, you're looking at possibly a crippling hole in its finances and its possible collapse. That's not sustainable finance. One of the stories in the press recently was that the cost to build a social house in Scotland has risen from about £150,000 to £200,000 in the last 5 years. If you actually look at inflation though, that house should only cost about £180,000 now. So it's not really so much how much expensive has housing gotten, it's how much expensive has housing gotten in relation to the rest of the economy. Where has that £20,000 gone, is the question that we should be asking. A lot of it's gone into land. Land is a speculative asset, as Robin was saying, in Scotland, where estates were once owned by old money who wanted the power that came with them. new money families and came in and started buying up grouse moors because you've got the prestige that come along with it. Now you've got folk like Gresham House and other asset managers coming in to harvest the land of Scotland for carbon credits. Carbon credits are the ultimate indulgence right now. Buy away the sin of your pollution by buying a piece of Scotland. They're almost an extortion racket as well. Buy a bit of forest, promise to not chop it down, get public money for not doing it. I've actually seen on forests in Scotland advertised on Zoopla, advertised as carbon offset investments for developments elsewhere. Think about that. Buy this forest and don't cut it down, and that will compensate you for the forest you did cut down to put up a cheap house. What do we do about that? Councils need to start buying land at what's known as existing use value. That means looking at a field and buying it at £1,000 an acre because right now it's a field, not because someone gave it planning consent for a house that hasn't been built yet. That land is now worth £20,000 or £50,000 an acre. That's driving up the cost of a lot of land. Land banking from developers doing the same because it's not in their interest to build all of the houses for all of the land that they own right now because that would crash the market. Next, we need to stop building crap housing. This ties into the quality of living and all of that efficiency planning that we've talked about in a lot of our papers. If part of the uplift in the price of a house, if part of that £20,000 is because we've increased the minimum level of energy efficiency of a house, just remember, that is making that house better for the person living in it. It's lowering their heating bills. In fact, it could be almost eliminating those heating bills if we build them up to passive house standards. I'm really pleased the Scottish Government adopted that principle, that the minimum level of energy efficiency in Scotland should be at that passive heating grade. Because otherwise, the houses that are going up right now that don't meet that grade, those developers are profiting off your fuel poverty, and so are the energy companies. That's not right. That needs to change. And the government, it's actually not true that the houses would cost more if you built them at this. We've already seen in Scotland that these passive grade houses can be built on a cost competitive level to the conventional builds now. So the old argument that it will cost more to build is eroding away as well. So the government could save money there. And they save money not having to treat the health conditions that you develop because you're living with your pet moulds. Another good thing that tenants have finally got the right to own pets, although maybe not that. Get a cat. So while that legislation's there, it's not yet in effect. I want the Scottish Government to push that forward at pace, get that in as quickly as we can, and don't water it down, because I know the developers are pushing for that. We need to tackle the developers themselves. This idea of private developers building entire suburban estates all in 2 or 3 designs, just cookie-cuttering houses and stamping them down, it's another very weirdly British thing. Go to a suburban street anywhere in Europe and you'll see a whole variety of different houses there. Not all of them were self-built. Those countries have much more in the way of small developers that will do 2 or 3 houses here and there, and they can do it in a cost competitive. Their houses are cheaper than ours. And Robin mentioned that thing of foreign ownership and wealth extraction. Just to take one of those mass developers in the UK, Persimmon. I looked up their ownership structure right now this morning. Of their shareholders, 4% of Persimmon is owned by the Norwegian Oil Fund. 3% is owned by the Canadian Public Sector Pension Fund. 5% is owned by US equity fund BlackRock, because if you're on the stock market, BlackRock will buy 5% of your company. And the rival Vanguard owns about 3%. So that's just in those shareholders, never mind all the rest, just in those shareholders. Every time Persimmon builds a house in the UK, 15% of the profits of that house go to Norway, Canada, and the US. And they're funding basically Norway's entire way of living and Canada's public sector pensions. Where's the Scottish National Pension Fund in all this? We don't have one. So we need a Scottish National Housing Company. This was one of the things that we had, that statistics agency that was passed. We have also passed in SNP the idea of a Scottish National Infrastructure Company. Wouldn't just be looking at housing and be looking at the whole gamut of major infrastructure in Scotland. We need to be doing that kind of heavy lifting, taking over from these companies to avoid those profits getting pulled out. That's how we make things cheaper. We used to do this. We used to do this after World War II. There was that massive surge of house building that completely redefined the whole of Britain. I remember seeing an old newsreel of Nye Bevan announcing the policy and saying a very affecting line to me. If you want to build a house, first you've got to get everything else right, which just goes into everything that we were saying there about how housing is connected to everything. But we didn't used to just build houses, we used to build entire communities. My house on my street is a really good example of that. It's a wee one-bedroom end terrace bungalow, and the rest of the street has got a few more of those type of houses, but it's also got 2-bedroom flats, 2- and 3-bedroom semi-detached and terrace houses. The idea of this street was deliberately designed this way. Think about what the housing ladder meant back then. You get a social house, a 1-bedroom flat. You get married, you start to think about kids, so you get a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom flat. You have those kids grow up and leave. You need to downsize, so you move into the 1-bedroom bungalow next door. All the while, you're still in your same street, you're still surrounded by your friends, you still have your community. I believe the right to a community is as important as the right to a house. So, I need to stop now. We have been talking about this for almost a decade. As you know, Commonweal, we are a very small think tank. Our total funding budget is less than the First Minister's salary. So if you're not already a donor, please consider signing up. I have just spent the last 20 minutes dumping half of that decade of work on housing onto you, at least half a dozen policy papers worth. If there's 2 lessons I want you to take away. What is a house? Is it a home for you in the centre of your community, or is it someone else's speculative asset? And how do we get better housing in an independent Scotland? Well, you'll notice I didn't talk much about independence because most of the powers we already have right now. So I'd suggest we start today.
Thank you, Craig. Can we have questions from anybody that hasn't asked questions yet? I mean, all due respect, if there's no other
Chris
hands
was
go
involved in some of the passing some of the policies that I mentioned there, so I can see why his hand is up.
Yeah.
But we'll give someone else a chance first.
Over here.
Thanks. Could you maybe talk, like, looking at where we are now a bit? So a lot of your ideas are very aspirational about, you know, fundamental change. But we've just had the housing bill passed.
Yep.
And we're still in a housing emergency. And what are your thoughts about Maureen McKellen's new strategy, putting a lot more money in? They are opening up to, I know your favourite topic, but international investors to come in and do more BTR, but also some mid-market rent as well. Do you think they're on the right track, or what would you want them to do differently, you know, in this coming next Parliament?
Still too much of that foreign direct investment. It's going to lead to all that profit extraction that Robin mentioned. We need to not do that. The extra money is obviously a good idea. The scale needs to be ramped right up. We do want to see much more in the way of patient, sustainable finance from the likes of SNIB, but also local authorities have the power to borrow on prudential means, which basically means if your investment is going to have a return on it, councils have almost unlimited power to borrow. It's not like building a school or a hospital where it's not fee paying, it's not got revenue, so you have to look at other things, which led us down the whole PFI route. That doesn't apply to housing. The Public Works Loan Fund can just, you know, put money into housing. So we really, again, take some of those saving things, aggressively look at land capture and existing use value, and start building more social housing, but build it not as private and affordable private rents, because affordable housing is a meaningless term when everything's a speculative bubble. More social housing, and look in the long term of what are the assets are you building and how are you shoring up public finances while doing it. So a lot of what Maddie's doing at the moment is good. A lot of it I would not do, and we need more of it.
Question at the front here.
Thanks. It's about, as you point out, councillors have, the Scottish Government has autonomy in some areas, as you've said, and the councillors have some autonomy, as you've said.
Yep.
So, one would think that, therefore, councillors of any political party, if they are either themselves or in coalition with another, what would be euphemistically called a centre-left party, or even a centre party, should be able to take some forwards themselves. And that would be, forget about being good to people, but it would be politically virtuous.
Yeah.
Okay. So are there any examples of any authorities, I don't care what party, who have decided to, we have this particular context, we are going to get this loan from the Public Works Loan Board, take the money, invest it, and take it forward? Are there any examples of basically councillors of whatever hue having their own self-confidence of actually doing something in that regard?
There definitely are. I'm not going to name and shame, I'm afraid.
Why to name them? Why is that a shame?
Not a shame, you're quite right. Partly because I can't quite remember the names off the top of my head. I'll admit my own ignorance. It's been a wee while since I've spoken to them, but some of the ones are doing it. It was some of the ones that came to me when we published the paper calling for SNIB funding of social housing. That came to me and said, yeah, we're already doing this with Public Works Loan Board. Why do you need the SNIB? And we had to talk about, well, we're also doing this to make SNIB stronger too. They're hitting the same problems though of the profit leakage, because they're having to go to the private developers to commission the housing. They don't have the in-house National Housing Company or National Infrastructure Company. And that's where the Scottish Government really should have that fundamental infrastructure there. And they're also, they've been having problems getting land because they don't have the existing use value powers. So it's where the ones are trying to push ahead and are doing it as well as they can, there's still some of those systemic barriers there that they're having to face as well.
Okay. Your question.
Sorry, I don't want to sound like a broken record. So obviously, it's already party policy,
yeah.
SNP party policy, to put in place a land tax intended to prevent speculation, to fund a publicly owned housing land corporation with powers to purchase at existing use value to allow councils and housing associations and communities to build social housing. So the question is, will you help me, you personally, help me persuade Mary McCallan to start implementing it?
Yes. As much as I can, as much as we can.
Thanks. I'm Hilary Sillitoe, co-author of Scotland 2070, which I've handed a few copies to some people. I recommend it. Says a lot of this stuff written 5 years ago. Sad how little has changed. What I was going to ask you is, at the moment, I think a lot of smaller, innovative builders have problems getting contracts from councils because they feel the competitive landscape is so skewed, not necessarily in favour of the big companies, but certainly in a way that's unfavourable to small companies. Have you any suggestions on how we can improve on that?
Yes, good question. Right, one of the weaknesses that comes with a lot of the procurement in Scotland is you'll get a council goes out and says, we need 10,000 houses here, can someone deliver us 10,000 houses, or whatever the number is. And the small developer can say, well, I could build you 5, but not that many. And there's maybe 100 companies that could say, I could build you 5, but not that many, and they can't get that contract. Whereas what the council could be doing is saying, right, we have this target of this many houses, how many can you deliver? And go down the street, right, there's this street, can you do 5, can you do 20? And just get the developer to do what they can and sort of break the contracts up like that. You can see the same going through a lot of other things. I'd love to see more farmers getting local produce into schools, for example, using that same method. You know, I'm a small farmer. I can produce enough milk to supply my local school, but not all of the schools in South Lanarkshire, for example. Well, fine, we'll find a way of getting that milk in. So yeah, that kind of not just looking at the supply target, looking at the demand and looking at the demand target, looking at the supply capacity and jigging the contracts around that to favour multiple small companies rather than one big developer.
That's all we've got time for just now. Thank you very much, Craig. We've got lots of